Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. It's more than just EMD. Thank you so much for being here with us today. My name is Dennis Young, and I am the marketing manager for PowerPhone. Before we begin this presentation, there's just a few things to note. This session is being recorded and will be made available after the presentation. At the bottom right-hand portion of your screen, you'll see a chat window where you can type in comments during the presentation. And I invite you all now to say hi and let us know where you're joining from. So to ensure the best possible audio experience, your mics have been muted and your cameras disabled. So if you have any questions, please use the question tab on your webinar control panel. You'll see that in the right-hand portion of your screen. You can ask questions at any time and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. So now it is my pleasure to introduce you to your two presenters today. Two people I thoroughly enjoy, Gary Letourneau and Jenny Smeltzer.
Hi.
So,
good morning, y'all.
So this man needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway because he needs one. Gary Letourneau. Gary is an implementation manager for PowerPhone, supporting total response emergency call handling solution at 911 centers across the U.S. and internationally. Gary has been involved in all aspects of public safety for 31 years, including 29 years at the PSAP. He holds an EMP, a CMCP, he slices, he dices. He also served as the Indiana NENA chapter president in 2017. Also joining us today is Jenny Smeltzer. Jenny is the current executive director at Sullivan County Emergency Communication Center in Tennessee, with over 35 years in the PSAP and a director for over 32 of those years. She has extensive knowledge of our total response solution and just overall one of our favorite people to work with. So without further ado, Gary and Jenny.
Good morning, y'all. Thanks for joining us across this great nation of ours, and welcome to Jenny. Thanks for spending time with us on this Thursday morning. Hope everybody's doing well. Thank you, Dennis, for those wonderful and kind words.
Of course.
We're here today kind of talk about a topic that I'm pretty passionate about, and that is what protocols are and the benefits they bring into the PSAP, not just for EMD, but also for the law and fire side of things. Dennis has kind of introduced Jenny Smeltzer with us, and you can see what her center down in Tennessee is up to and doing. They came to us in 2017, and she's going to kind of share how that has gone for you all here later in the presentation. So PowerPhone, I joined PowerPhone a number of years ago. PowerPhone's been in business for 37 years, going way back, starting out as a training company, and over time evolved into the protocols market, for which we've got 5 patents and over 700 systems deployed worldwide. Our mission is to leverage people, the processes, and technology to empower public safety. And the protocols are a prime example of just how we can do that. Dennis, and I believe we have a poll here to kind of get us starting out about staffing.
We do. So you're going to see in the poll tab in the, it's 2 away from the chat tab where you're talking right now. I'm going to publish a poll. And it's real simple. It's going to be asking, are you having staffing issues in your agency? So just click on that poll and we'll wait while we see some answers.
And while we wait, again, I'd just like to thank you all for your time. We are going to be covering how you can utilize the law and fire protocols, and basically how some calls can actually have the effect of you may need to use law, fire, and EMS, particularly in motor vehicle accidents. So that's going to be something that we talk about coming up here, and we certainly invite your questions at the end of the session to maybe help you get a better feel for how to utilize them.
So it's looking just early results, about even split between yes, worse ever, and yes, but no worse than normal. So staffing is clearly a problem, with only about 3% saying, no, we're good to go.
Wow. Yep, we've seen that in the national news.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. In 911, we have minimum calls or requirements for every call. Obviously, we want to get the address details. If we don't know where we're going, it's no good. We need to get the caller details. How do we contact them back? What is their role in this evolving situation? Incident specifics. We need to know what's going on, the who, the what, the where, the investigative approach that we take to every call, whether it's a law, fire, or EMS call. And we need to also dispatch the responders, as well as keep those responders informed as to the call situation so they can anticipate hazards, additional resources, and that kind of thing. We all know from having sat in the chair that today's call takers and dispatchers do so much more. You deal with wants and warrants, validations, locates, records, walk-in traffic, just a plethora of things that can kind of really work into it. And of course, when you receive one 911 call, you get dozens more, it seems like. So it is a very changing and challenging environment that everyone really steps up to plate and does well for. Protocols. Protocols are a tool that can help you in that mission of ours. What are they? They're structured information gathering. We have a list of questions, of instructions, of things to pass on, of information to get, of information to relay. It's very specific to the type of call you're working on. So you don't just open up a generic set, you're opening up something specific to a domestic, a breathing problem, a hazardous material situation, submerged vehicles. We also give pre-arrival instructions to the caller. That's public expectation these days. It is what our profession demands. And we also are obligated to update the responders en route to the call, again, so they can better prepare for the situation, whether it's more resources, a drug box, a pike pole, whatever we need to do, we should pass that information on. And protocols help us gather the information specific to that nature of call that they're going to. They offer a lot of benefits. They're standardized information gathering, whether it's from shift to shift or from PSAP to PSAP in a ETSB environment. Everyone's on the same page. The responders know, the supervisors know, the trainers know that the information is being collected consistently in the same manner by each protocol. It also helps to address staffing or turnovers, and Ginny's going to give us some insight more on that here shortly. We are the zero-minute response time. We are known as the first responders. Help begins when the call is answered. Pre-arrival instructions are important. So many times we have the unfortunate situation where all we get is a scream in the phone and somebody's crying for help, and immediately we're doing child or infant CPR. The protocols help us get to that so that we are cutting into that golden hour. We are impacting and saving lives. It increases the professionalism. That's something that this industry has strived for many years, and we're finally gaining traction within it. It creates trained and qualified virtual responders. And the days of being a virtual responder, we know are going to increase as we start getting videos of incidents. This helps us prepare, anticipate, and react to what we are dealing with either in our ears or in front of our eyes down the road. Protocols help with stress. We don't get that freeze up if we get a call that just rocks us to the core. We can look at the screen and know this is what I need to do. Shake yourself out of it. It helps with CTOs. We'll talk more about that. It enhances responder safety. We are gathering the information specific to that event that we can pass on based on years of experience in protocols. We know we always focus on scene safety, on responder safety, gathering information so that they can arrive in a better environment, more protected of themselves, knowing how many people they need to evacuate, what areas of the building perhaps are occupied, or if any handicapped or elderly people. Protocols guide you through that goal in the call process. It also helps us learn from our missteps in the QA process. We identify trends, areas for improvement, and objectively measure performance. It allows us for coaching opportunities to help better train our staff and improve our performance, our image, and our professionalism, and the trust that we get from the public and the responders. It elevates our standards of care. It reduces liability and exposure. We have third-party accountability to our commissioners, our government councils, our public, even our neighbors who know what we do. And they all have expectations of us based on what the media has shown. And protocols are a great tool in our toolbox to help meet those expectations. And it also simplifies training. And Jeannie, if you wouldn't mind chiming in here on your experience with how simplifying training is a benefit of the protocol.
Well, anytime you hire new people in, a lot of times they don't know really what the job is until they get in and start training. And then fear starts to develop because they are not confident in knowing what to ask and when to ask. And they're usually sitting beside another trainer that's having to feed them everything. Well, using protocols, you're going to reduce that fear because they've got a script, so to speak, to go by. And it helps the trainer. It eases the fear and builds the confidence of the new trainee. And it speeds up the training process.
Very much so. And it also cuts down on the shoot from the hip scenarios, correct?
Well, it does. And it stops tunnel vision. You know, sometimes when you start answering calls, you get so engrossed in the actual nature of the call that you forget some of the questions you need to ask. For example, you take a really bad law enforcement call, but they also need EMS because someone's hurt. You get focused on the law enforcement and forget about the injuries. And this keeps you from doing that. It keeps you on track because the cards themselves address all the concerns, police, fire, and medical on each one.
Exactly. And I know we have a number of CTOs on this group. If that's not something you've considered, it certainly is something to take a look at. It gets them familiar with the job ahead of actually sitting in the chair and taking that first call. So when they get that active shooter or the submerged vehicle, we are coming into it informed rather than being blindsided by the call. So certainly an obvious facet that we want to keep our eyes on.
Well, and so many times there are calls that you may never answer in your career. Then again, you may answer them 2 or 3 times in your career, such as a bank robbery or a hostage situation or a mass casualty event. You may never have any of those, or you may only have one of those. And if you've got the protocol to fall back on, you don't have to rely on your memory to get through, and you know that you've handled it the right way.
Exactly, those high risk, low frequency calls that blindside us. Just like pilots have checklists for the worst case scenarios, the protocols can act just like that so that we are not the deer in the headlights.
Absolutely.
And I know, Jenny, you've encountered this in a lot of PSAPs. Anytime we introduce something new, there's some resistance and reasons given for why we shouldn't do this. Forced path questioning isn't realistic. The delays in dispatch, the content isn't relevant, and liability concerns. And so many more reasons are thrown back in the administrator's face for why this isn't a good thing for us to be doing. And we need to go into this approach that we can counter all of that. We need to look at guided flexibility. Just because a question is in that order doesn't mean you can't ask it in that order. Use your common sense. If the caller's already volunteered you the information, getting it. If they throw a curveball and you need to ask something that isn't in the content, ask it. Use your repetitive persistence in order to get the caller to listen to you, or turn your voice down so they're forced to be quiet and listen to what you're trying to instruct them. Explain to them the liability issues, that if it's not documented, it doesn't happen. The 911 recordings may not be around forever. The fact that we have this documentation shows and can protect both the dispatcher, the agency. There's so many benefits to it. The content isn't relevant. Content can be reviewed and changed as needed to be. So, and delays in dispatch. The more you do it, the more instinctive it becomes. You're gathering, and if you do it the same time every way, you're only going to increase your speed. Get your responders involved. Bring them into the center and say, this is what we're doing. These are the benefits to you. Help us work through it. Getting the buy-in early will make the transition much, much easier. And within months, you're going to see very positive results, and not just in your QA, but in the confidence level of your responders, and hopefully from the media from a call that has turned out extremely well. Jenny, anything more to add to that from your perspective?
Well, we got a lot of resistance when we put this. I've implemented this in 2 different centers. I changed jobs or changed centers about 4 or 5 years ago. And when we first put it in the centers, there is a lot of resistance. A lot of people don't want to follow it, especially seasoned dispatchers. Someone's been there 15, 20 years. They say, I've been asking the right questions for 20 years. Why do I need a protocol? I know what to ask. Well, that's all fine and good, but sometimes you forget. And we did some testing, and what I did was I had 2 people that decided that they would do the call for me. They would simulate the caller, and we wrote out the scenario just like it was to be presented. We put 2 dispatchers in separate rooms, and we had the caller call them, and they ran through all the questions and everything. And at the end of that, we found that the one who used the protocol got more information quicker and got it dispatched faster than the one who was shooting by the hip. And that person had been in the center like 15 years. So we proved that the protocol works.
And have you over time, Jenny, seen how those initial response times got even quicker in the years coming down the road? And
Absolutely.
Also feedback. Have you gotten feedback from the responders as well, too, about the information that they're getting?
We have gotten some back, especially from the medical community and the fire community. Law enforcement tend to have a higher response time anyway because they're already out in the field and their response, is pretty quick. But fire and EMS is where we saw the biggest difference. I had been using EMS protocols, since 1989, but we hadn't used law enforcement consistently. Right. We tried to use law enforcement, and we wrote our own. I wrote our law enforcement and fire, but we didn't force the dispatchers to use them. They were more of a crutch. And then when we went to PowerPhone, and it was all in one card, you didn't have to go to 3 different cards for an incident. We started enforcing it. You have to use protocols, and consistently, we got better results from our responders, and we got quicker response times on scene.
What impact did that have on your staff?
Well, I think over a period of time, they started learning that, yes, protocols are the answer. They will help them do their job better and quicker and provide better service to the callers and the responders.
And job satisfaction, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, and it built their confidence. They no longer had to try to remember 500 things when they answered the phone.
Very good point. And there's always so much else going on in the background, and if you get distracted, you can quickly come back to where you need to be in the call.
Absolutely. And they're not so strict that you have to ask every single question. You can ask what's appropriate, and that may lead you to ask something else that you might not have asked otherwise. And then the fact that every center operates a little different, and all the responders operate a little different. So it was easier for us to use a protocol system that we could adapt to what we needed. Our medical director went in and went through all of them and made some changes. We ran them through our fire departments, and we had our sheriff's department go through them and look at them and offer suggestions, and we made those changes.
So that helps, and that addressed the concerns about the content isn't relevant.
Right.
So both sides in dispatch and the responders knew that this wasn't some outdated or inappropriate system. You were giving an aspirin advisory when it wasn't what your area protocols were indicating, for example. Right. Very good. Thank you. Time to turn back to Dennis. We have a protocol poll to reach out with.
Right. So as before, you're going to see your polls on the middle of that right-hand section. It's going to be, do you use a protocol system today? It's going to be published right now. It's roughly about the same split, 42% yes, but for only EMD. About 38% are saying no, and then 5% saying yes for police and fire. So if we look at that statistics, that's you're looking at 30% as no. And what would you say to that? That's just, it's a pretty high number from where I'm standing. What do you think?
First thing that comes to my mind is that's a lawsuit waiting to happen.
Yeah. Yep. All right,
very much, particularly because that could be the high risk, low frequency ones too, that you indicated too, Jenny, the bank robberies, the hostage situations. where we go on our guts and instincts, but we get focused on something singular when we forget the big picture.
Well, and with the liability, if you're using a protocol that's approved by your agency and you follow that protocol, you as a dispatcher call taker are protected. I mean, you could still get named in the lawsuit, but chances are there's not going to be a finding against you because you used an approved protocol. If you don't have an approved protocol, you're kind of sitting out there on your own little island. And you very well could be sued and win.
Right. And there's other benefits too to using the protocols we're kind of discuss here. Talking about police, and that's one that I know a lot of agencies, and Jenny, I think you yourself indicated it was one of the last ones that you integrated.
Yeah.
But when you sit back and look at why should we use protocols, yes, we use them for medical because we are giving instructions from CPR to childbirth. There's also benefits in the law side of things. Evidence preservation, first and foremost, whether it's an assault, whether it's a burglary, something like that. The protocols are designed to keep that in mind, to give instructions to the caller to help preserve evidence, whether it's marks on bodies or evidence within the building. Responder safety, first and foremost, as well. We want to make sure that we know about weapon status. We want to know about what particular areas may be occupied. We want to get descriptions of the persons or vehicles involved. So an officer doesn't happen to make a traffic stop, and that happens to be the suspect thinking, and the officer just thinks he's making a traffic stop for speeding when he was involved in an assault just several minutes before. So we wrap that into protocols as well. And that goes back to the liability issues. Spontaneous utterances and dying declarations. All too often, unfortunately, dispatchers are the last voice that somebody hears. And we also record background noise on the phone. We hear things that's preserved on tape, and we all are hearing and seeing on TV and social media the 911 calls that are played that have those spontaneous utterances and declarations that so much provide a impact on the prosecution of it that we wouldn't have otherwise. And the investigative questioning can greatly assist the investigators. The protocols are designed to help drill down into that situation and extract information from the caller that maybe we wouldn't think to do otherwise. You think missing persons, hostage situations, those kind of things. The protocols are all designed to help us kind of flow through that, and maybe we're not realizing it, but we're doing a better job of gaining that evidence, preserving the evidence, and giving investigators something to listen to when they listen to the call that maybe we didn't catch, but certainly signals a red flag to them based on interviews that they may have done. Larcenies, we talked about missing persons. In today's world, suspicious persons and vehicles. We're seeing an increase in those and the problems that they encounter. The protocols help you get all the information that you need. Again, the order that they are in, if they're volunteering you the information, you want that guided flexibility, make a note of the information, but you have all the questions that are needed to ensure responder safety, to maybe help you identify the vehicle that's left the scene of a now fatal hit and run accident. It helps in the apprehension. And again, a lot of the times it's recorded, so it's good for cases. It's good for use in future trainings. All very good information to have. The protocols are your guide to doing it. Ginny?
Well, you reminded me of a situation that I became aware of. There was some tips came in that this lady was going to be murdered or attacked. And so they were responding to the scene, and they, rather than ask about the description of the victim, who didn't realize she was going to be a victim, they didn't get any of that. And when they got to the scene, the person that they thought was the victim was actually the suspect. The victim was already tied up in another part of the house and secured. So these call guides, and not just any call guides, they provide you that information. There's always a screen available to you to take a person description. And when you don't necessarily know who the suspect is, and maybe you don't exactly know who the victim is, descriptions of those two people can be very significant. Even in a hostage situation, you want to get descriptions of your hostages. And these cards help remind you to do that. And, as I said earlier, you may go your whole career and never get a hostage situation. But the one time you do, you certainly want to make sure you get all the information to keep the responders safe and the people at the scene.
And Jeannie, when you've implemented the protocols, one thing that I think that we all kept in mind was that the protocols are a guide. They help us through the call, but we still should focus on those other skills to help us through the call. The active, deep listening, our instincts that we hone over the years, listening to the background noise, experience maybe at that address before of other calls that maybe can take a veer in how this protocol is going to be utilized or where we go with it. Have you found that to be true as well?
Absolutely. We had a call a few years ago. It was called in as fireworks, and it wasn't 4th of July or something like that. So it was kind of a out of season fireworks. Well, as it turned out, it was gunshots. And as it progressed, I think the dispatchers became aware this isn't normal fireworks. And it ended up being a situation where the officers were placed in a whole lot of danger because of the difference in shots fired versus fireworks calls. And so, I have adapted our protocols to include some additional questions that maybe will help prevent that in the future. And with these protocols, you can do that. You can adapt to what you see as a need.
And that goes a long way to helping the dispatchers be more comfortable in doing their jobs, correct?
Yes, and they offer good suggestions sometimes. Well, I wish this protocol would ask this, or maybe we should ask this a different way. There's a lot of differences in people across the country and how they operate and how they report things. And sometimes it's good to adapt to your local environment.
Absolutely. And whether it's a 1 dispatch council or a 20 dispatch council out in Kentucky or Tennessee, the protocols can be effective whether it's 1 person or 20 utilizing them as well.
Absolutely. And if you change it on the protocol, everybody gets the update at the same time.
Yep. There's no memo that needs to be sent out and signed, and everybody knows they're all on the same page.
No, and it keeps it consistent.
Key word that keeps coming up in here is consistency. And that translates into success down the road for everybody. Fire protocols. Again, they can be beneficial. Sometimes we tend not to think of them in very specific terms, but it also helps with resource allocation, response prioritization. Obviously, a structure fire, we want to get the fire trucks going to pull any entrapped people out. We're going to want to get EMS on the way to deal with any injuries from the fire or injuries or overexertion to the firefighters. We want to get law enforcement to secure the area so they can run hoses between hydrants and operate in the streets safely. We also, again, are down with the 0-minute response time. Somebody calls in that is in an industrial accident. We can either work to control bleeding. We can maybe give some instructions to a caller that they were going to, well, I'm going to pull this impaled object out of them. We can give them instructions, no, not to do that. So we give instructions, and we also give guidance that can really save lives within the very first few seconds or minutes of the call. And we can update responders to the changing scene environments. You get a submerged vehicle. We can indicate to them now that vehicle is dropped 5 feet in the water. There's a very small window of air left in the vehicle. Maybe that's going to change how they approach the vehicle. Structure fires, we need to know about exposures. We need to know what the smoke is doing so we can anticipate. Obviously, we need to know about entrapments. Those kind of things all play into a role. Just like with EMS, if it comes in as a fall but ends up being a chest pain, we want to let those responders know en route. So they're bringing in more than just a cot. They're bringing in oxygen, the drug boxes, the monitors, those kind of things. And likewise with fire departments, maybe they're going to bring in pike poles, that kind of thing. So all the information that we give our responders helps them better prepare and respond on the scene. They're not getting out and being blindsided, not knowing that somebody was trapped in the rear of the building and they're not prepared or don't know how to get back in there. So by utilizing the protocols, getting the information, and then going the extra step of relaying it when something crucial or possibly crucial comes up, we can address that. Ginny?
I agree with all of that. I think our centers have benefited so much for the implementation of these policies and procedures and protocols. And I think the responders didn't really like it at first. I had a fireman one time tell me, we don't need to know anything on a fire, just give me an address. We'll see the smoke and so on and so forth. Well, we know that that's not true. You need to know about the hazardous materials, and you need to know who's in the house and where, and can they get out safely? If not, how are you going to barricade inside the place? All those things come with protocols, and you don't get the dispatcher who's umming and ahhing and ohing and filling up space because they're not ready yet for the next question. These
Great
protocols
point.
keep you in line and keep you going.
Exactly. And if the curveball gets thrown and there's not something on the protocol, again, use your experience, use your common sense, navigate through it. Another scenario that comes up sometimes is where we have to use the integrated protocols. We kind of talked about this. We're a single number for help, and we need a single integrated protocol system for this. And when Jeannie and I were talking previously, you gave me some really good insight as to why these protocols and how you came about them. Would you explain for us?
Well, I'm not sure what I told you, but using the integrated protocols, before we had 3 sets of protocols. We had one for fire, one for law enforcement, one for EMS. So like, for instance, a wreck came in. Well, we always started with the law enforcement protocol. Well, if you got caught up in that, you didn't necessarily get the answers to the fire EMS questions. And you got tied up, and it delayed getting them out there, and also put them in a safety issue situation where you didn't get enough information for them. And that happens on more than just wreck calls.
Okay. And with the protocols too, as you're going through the questions and answers, a lot of protocols have information that shows up over on the right side of the screen, whether it's an instruction or a consideration that the dispatcher may need to give, as in the case of getting people downwind from a possibly hazardous leak or something to that effect. I'm sure that that's probably been a big help, especially with the newer people and those that don't have field experiences in those disciplines. Would that be correct?
That is absolutely correct. It's like a structure fire, and you've got somebody stuck on the inside telling them to get low to the ground, put something under the door, like a towel or wet towels, or get in a bathtub. Those are all things that may or may not be on the protocol, but it will bring you to those conclusions. It brings up some things that you need to tell them to keep them safe.
Yeah. And with that, we also have the pre-arrival instructions, but we also have the post-dispatch instructions that, again, go in a consistent order, gathering the medications, the pets, securing the pets, watching for the responders, those kind of things that, particularly in our early days and sitting in the chair, we somewhat tend to forget. And those obviously going to be different in a law and or a fire environment. So by using them repetitively, it becomes more second nature, and we know that our responders are safer and that the citizens that we serve are also in a much better position.
And we know that pets are a big issue, and you need to find out on most all of these calls if they've got pets and if they're aggressive. I mean, there's nothing worse for a paramedic or law enforcement officer or firefighter to get there and try to go into the scene to do their job, and now they're getting chased out by a dog or two.
Mm-hmm. Been there. So you indicated, like with motor vehicle accidents, it helps you focus. If you're going through the protocol and it comes in, there's been 2 vehicles, and the protocol asks about injuries right off the bat, that then puts the focus on the dispatcher to gather that information. And then these are the resources that I'm going to be dispatching. I need to now consider sending EMS, certainly law and possibly fire. That's probably a help as well in the training of the new dispatcher. If they're dispatching resources, kind of a better timeline on who who do I need to get going and when? Now is a good time to do that. Has that been true for you as well?
That is very true. And the dispatch configurations or suggestions can be altered and adjusted depending on what your area does. And with each answer to each question, it can change that response as to who goes and whether they go hot or cold or warm. And they no longer have to try to figure it out. It will come up for them. And if they look at it and they think, yeah, that's right, they can send it that way. If they think, well, I also probably need to send XYZ ambulance, then you can alter that dispatch and put that in there. And it's very easy to do.
One of the side benefits to all of that is that over time, I've seen that as protocols are used, the responders then quit maybe calling in with radio traffic or phone calls trying to get more information because they know that they are getting that information to them as opposed to before. Again, have you experienced that as well?
Yeah, especially in the past. I mean, we got 20 questions on calls after you dispatched them out. Well, did you ask this or do they have that? Where's this? How long ago? Has this ever happened before? And with the protocols now, we pretty much get all that information before they have a chance to ask us. And it's cut way back on the radio traffic.
Great. And folks, that's something to consider too, as you look at protocols, is get your responders involved early in the process, make them aware of the benefits to them, get their buy-in and explain to them the process. I think it'll go a long way towards what Jenny has said. There's a lot of unintended benefits that you don't anticipate until you've been doing it for a while. Any other benefits to this, Jenny, that we maybe not touched on?
Trust and respect. You know, if you're constantly presenting yourself as a team player and we're on the same team and we're all trying to do this, focus on the same types of things with the responders, you give them all the information they need without them having to second guess you and ask, that builds trust and it builds a lot of respect. And it goes a long way in relationships and it will help you in your career as time passes.
And we all know that once that trust is lost, it takes forever to recover. And it may not just be an individual, it can be an entire shift or the entire agency. So
yes,
great
that's
point.
why sometimes when you get new dispatchers, you know, someone from the field will call in and they'll ask for a seasoned dispatcher.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's because they built that trust. And, you know, sometimes that's very disturbing to the newer people because they don't understand. I mean, you're not even giving me a chance. You're just automatically going to this other person. So it takes a while to build it, and it sure doesn't take but a second to lose it.
Exactly. And I cannot really consider that. So thank you. So in conclusion, it's not just for EMD, as Jenny has given us some very good examples. Protocols can and should apply to every call. Every responder deserves a chance at getting on scene better prepared and also making it home after that call. The protocols will help. Same with the people on the scene, the victims involved. They're not calling you on a good day, they're calling you on a bad day. The protocols will help you get through that for them. Consistent call handling is the foundation of an effective response, whether it's between individual dispatchers in the PSAP or entire shifts across the 66-person PSAP. The administrators, the responders, the dispatchers, the supervisors, CTOs all know that it's being done the same way every time for each protocol. And as Jenny has greatly pointed out, a lot of the benefits to that, not just within the team, but within the community and within the responders. And obviously it's a better protection of callers and a higher standard of care, and one quite obviously that the public is more expecting of these days for us. And with that, Dennis, I believe we've probably accumulated a list of some questions.
So not yet. So if people see that bottom right next to the chat tab, you'll see a questions tab. If you guys have any questions, please pop them in there. We'll give a couple minutes for questions and answer them as they pop in. I know people probably have some. And again, use the questions tab, not the chat channel, so we don't lose it.
And Dennis, would you like me to stop sharing my screen now?
Well, we have one more slide. Just if you want to pop it on that while we're waiting for questions
Great.
to come in, we'll go through the next steps. You will be receiving a replay of this webinar. If you want to go through content, it gets sent immediately after this, or you could stay in this channel and it will replay afterwards. I will also put in a link to our website where you'll have a multitude of resources, webinars, etc. Or you could reach out to us directly with questions at info@powerphone.com. So right now I'm going to set up that link. And let's see, we have one question in. Sorry, Jessica, can what be emailed to you? The webinar, it will be emailed to you if that's what you're asking. And then Amy asked, does Total Response integrate with Spillman FlexCAD? Which
Yes, it does.
I do believe it does. And we're getting a lot of integration questions with IMC. Yes, with are there plans to interface? So a lot of interfacing questions. Those are. Could we have questions more pertaining to the webinar itself? Would be great. But I will say our program Total Response does have the capability to interface with any CAD. We'll just have to reach out. So
on our website.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'd like to comment on a comment in the chat room from Amy Lucero. I hope I said that right. She says she anticipates resistance, that they've never had anything like this, but certainly believes it's a necessity. Amy, you're right to expect that resistance. It's change, and it's quite a big change. And a lot of it goes in how much information you're going to share with them and how open you are about it when you get ready to implement it.
And great point, Virginia. As I go around the country implementing this, one of the best things that you can do is early on get your team involved with the process. Make them understand what you're going to and why, the benefits of it, and then through the implementation process, have them work with the entire team, and that creates a smoother transition.
And y'all are asking a lot of questions about integration with your CAD. One of the great things about the integration is when you ask the primary and secondary questions, all of that will transfer over into your CAD narrative. And that's really great when you're trying to go back and do a quality assurance review, or maybe the call got subpoenaed to court and you go have to testify as to what happened. And it proves that you've done the protocol and the answers that caller gave you when you asked them.
Right. And on PowerPhone's website, we do have a list of all the CAD companies, and it's a considerable list that we do interface with.
That's not right now, Gary. That will be up shortly on the new web. So we have a new website that's on that will be there soon. And also, Amy, yes, you can share this. We'll also have it on our YouTube page shortly. So you can visit our YouTube page, PowerPhone, and look at old videos as well. All right. Is there any more questions that anybody said? Okay. I guess this is a good Ginny question from Kimberly. I'll let you read it. Do you see it there? The one I'm looking at?
Questions?
Yeah, if you go to the questions tab from Kimberly. Because I'm biased. I'm horrifically biased. At least you're in the industry.
Oh, okay. What makes PowerPhone better than other protocols? Well, I don't want to say better, but let's say I prefer it because I've used other protocols, and you have 3 sets of cards and 3 sets of everything: fire, EMS, law enforcement. And some of them are really stiff. I mean, you have to follow their protocol exactly, and they don't want you to change anything. And changing something in the protocols themselves, in the equipment and the software, is very hard. And I have found with PowerPhone, one of the biggest selling points was I could make it adaptable to us and the way we do business. And I have been able to do that. And I make most of the changes we need in the PowerPhone software myself. They've taught me. They've been real good about teaching me. They're great about answering questions. I'll call them and say, hey, my dispatchers would really like to be able to do this, and I can't figure it out. And they'll either give me an answer right then, or they'll call me back shortly and say, okay, we figured out a way to do this for you. And it's just so adaptable and so easy to use. And one card does it all. And the quality assurance that goes with it and the documentation is just amazing. I can't say I can't say enough good things about it. I've had it since 2016, but I've been looking at it since it first came out before we were able to buy it.
I said she's our favorite customer.
Well, I love the product. I mean, the training is easy. It's not as expensive as the others to purchase, and the training is not as expensive as some of the others.
And Amy, so Jenny, she's asking about your credentials again, and you can go over them before we end the show.
Well, I have gone from assistant director to director. I became a director in 1993. And I worked at one agency for 24 years. And then I came back to my original agency where I was at 6 years. And I've been back here 5. I've been an auxiliary sheriff. I've been a paramedic in the field. The only thing I haven't done is fire. I've done a lot of training with fire, but I've not actually been on fire scenes other than as an EMS professional. And I did that for a few years. I was an EMS instructor. I taught EMT and first responder and CPR and all that stuff. I feel like in all the years, there's been a lot of stuff. I mean, I put in our first CAD, and I did all the implementation on that. We were a very small center. In fact, both centers that I work at have been small, and so I wore a lot of hats. You couldn't just be a director. You had to be the computer person and the trainer and all the other stuff too.
Well, is there any more questions that we can answer before we close shop?
Anna is asking for my contact information. Is that on that slide?
It is not, but after this webinar, or she can reach out to us. We can give you Jenny's information if you would like, if that's all right with you, Jenny.
Absolutely. I mean, anybody who has any questions, anything I can help them with. I've gotten a lot of help over 35 years, so I certainly don't mind giving back and be happy to help anybody.
Oh, actually, yeah, we'll just give it. And I think if you signed into this, we have an email of yours, so we'll send you Jenny's information through email.
And my thanks to all of you for joining us on this Thursday morning. Your questions, and Jenny, certainly for your time and your expertise and your willingness to be open with us.
Well, thank you very much. I've loved being here. And like I said, if I can help anybody, please let me know.
All right. Well, thank you everybody again for joining us today. Again, a huge thank you to Jenny and Gary for doing this webinar. Like I said, you will receive a link instantly, or if you want more information, you can visit powerphone.com, or you'll be able to see this video again on our YouTube page. So thank you all very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.